My name is Susan Kalev, and I was born in the summer of 1944 in a ghetto in Budapest, the capital of Hungary. And my mother was able to escape being deported to Auschwitz, and she was very lucky to be taken to the ghetto in Budapest. And that is how we survived. I had an older sister who was 3 years older than I. And we stayed in the ghetto for 6 months over a very cold and harsh winter. There was very little food and it was very cold. And we lived there for 6 months until January of 1945, when the Russians came and liberated Hungary. At that point, my sister did not survive. She succumbed to an illness. And my mother found out that her sister, her parents, and her husband, my father, did not come back, and only she and I survived. So she returned to the town where she got married. And at that point, we moved to another town, about 2 hours west of Budapest. And it turned out that I was the only surviving Jewish child in that small town. And when I went to school, maybe I was 5 or 6, the other kids called me names, and they called me Jew, something really like ridiculing me. And I went home and I asked my mother, what is that word? What does it mean, the word Jew? Because I never heard that word. And why are the kids calling me names? And then she tried to explain to me when I was maybe 5 or 6 that we were Jewish and that those kids learned that word from their parents. But I don't think I really understood that. So that was my first experience of knowing that I was different, that I was Jewish. So we lived in Hungary till 1956, when I was 12 years old. And in 1956, there was a revolution in Hungary. The students, there was an uprising by the students because they wanted to be liberated from the communist regime. And it was very violent. There were tanks and rifles and gunshots, and people lived in the shelters in the basement. And it looked like the Hungarians were winning and the Russians retreated. About 5 days later, the Russians came back, squashed the revolution, and they took over. On November 11, we packed our bags and we took suitcases and we escaped through the forest, the border between Hungary and Austria. We escaped through that forest and escaped to a small town in Austria. And we were put into a kind of a summer camp where Hungarian refugees were staying. And I also remember that there was anti-Semitism in the refugee camps. I was 12 years old. I was old enough to understand that. At Christmas of 1956, when I was 12, we arrived in New York. For the first time, I saw people who were dressed Orthodox, and I could see that people were free to talk about being Jewish. And I met other classmates who were Jewish. It was a very new experience for me again. And when I was 21, I decided to visit Israel. After I just fell in love with Israel. I stayed on the kibbutz as a volunteer. And I wanted to stay there. And then I met my husband there when I got married. And I went back to school. And I got my first degree, bachelor's in social work in Israel. And I worked there and I had my first baby. I spent 6 years in Israel. And then we came back, my husband and I came back to New York, and we decided to stay here. I think that you never finish with those memories. They always stay with you. I think that what I want is for my past to be a source of strength for me, and that I will be able to educate other people about it. It's very important to me to reimagine my past. And I feel that the future was denied to my family, who did not survive, but I don't want to deny them their past. So it's very important to me to be connected to that. I also go back to Israel every few years, again, to reconnect to that experience and also to my family. I think I'm also very connected to that past history because it was interrupted. It was interrupted by the war. It was interrupted by communism. I'm still attached to that life that could have been, that was interrupted, that was taken away.